There's a moment that happens in conversations that almost everyone recognizes. You're speaking with someone, you share a thought, an idea, or something you believe is important. And before you even finish explaining it, the other person moves past it. They interrupt. They brush it aside. Sometimes they laugh it off. Sometimes they ignore it entirely. The conversation continues like what you said never mattered. And in that moment, something uncomfortable happens inside you. You feel dismissed. You feel like your words didn't land. Like what you said didn't carry weight, and even though the conversation moves forward, your mind doesn't. Part of you stays stuck in that moment. You start replaying it. Did I say something wrong? Did I sound foolish? Maybe I shouldn't have said anything. And that small moment begins shrinking something inside you. Not loudly, but quietly. It makes you hesitate next time you want to speak. It makes you second guess your thoughts before sharing them. And over time, enough moments like this can slowly change how you see your own voice. You begin wondering whether your ideas matter as much as you thought they did. You begin wondering whether other people's opinions carry more weight than your own. And that's how people slowly start feeling small in conversations. Not because they lack insight, not because they lack intelligence, but because they've experienced enough dismissive moments that they begin questioning themselves. Once that pattern begins forming, something subtle changes in your behavior. You start speaking less. You wait longer before sharing your thoughts. You tell yourself it's not worth interrupting. You tell yourself maybe someone else already said it better. But the truth is, that hesitation rarely comes from a lack of ideas. It comes from a lack of confidence in how those ideas will be received. Because when someone feels dismissed, their mind tries to protect them from experiencing that feeling again. It tries to avoid situations where their voice might be ignored. So instead of speaking freely, they start filtering everything they say. They rehearse thoughts in their head. They evaluate whether an idea is good enough before sharing it. And sometimes they decide not to speak at all. But here's something important that most people overlook in these moments. Being dismissed in a conversation does not automatically mean your words lacked value. Sometimes the other person simply wasn't listening carefully. Sometimes they were distracted. Sometimes they were more interested in their own thoughts than understanding yours. And sometimes the timing of the conversation just wasn't right. But the mind often interprets those moments differently. It interprets them as proof. Proof that your voice isn't as important. Proof that your perspective doesn't matter as much. Proof that maybe you should stay quieter next time. And once that belief settles in, it slowly begins shaping your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone with valuable thoughts. You start seeing yourself as someone whose ideas might not be worth sharing. But this is where something important needs to be understood. Many people who carry quiet authority today experience those same moments earlier in their lives. They were interrupted. They were dismissed. Their ideas were brushed aside. But over time, they learned something that changed how they handled those situations. They realized that being dismissed occasionally is simply part of interacting with people. Conversations are imperfect. People misunderstand each other. People interrupt each other. People sometimes react without fully hearing what was said. And once someone understands that, those moments stop feeling like personal attacks. They begin seeing them differently. Instead of interpreting dismissal as a judgment of their worth, they begin seeing it as part of the natural flow of conversation. That shift in perspective changes everything. Because the moment you stop taking every dismissive reaction personally, you stop shrinking your voice to avoid it. You remain steady, you stay calm, and when the moment is right, you speak again. Not louder, not more aggressively, just with clarity. And that calm consistency slowly builds something powerful. Self-trust. Self-trust is the foundation of quiet authority. It means trusting that your thoughts have value even if they aren't immediately validated. It means trusting your perspective even when others react differently. It means recognizing that your voice deserves space in a conversation just like anyone else's. And when someone develops that kind of self-trust, their presence begins to change. They no longer rush to defend every statement they make. They no longer panic if someone disagrees. They remain calm. They remain thoughtful. And when they speak, they do so with a steadiness that naturally draws attention. Ironically, this calm presence often makes people listen more carefully. Because composure creates clarity. When someone becomes emotionally reactive, their words often lose impact. But when someone stays composed and speaks with intention, their words carry weight. And that weight doesn't come from volume. It comes from confidence. Not loud confidence, quiet confidence. The kind that doesn't try to overpower the room. The kind that simply trusts its own voice. And this is where many people rediscover something they had almost forgotten: their dignity. Because dignity doesn't come from winning every conversation, it doesn't come from always being right. It comes from knowing that your thoughts deserve to exist without apology. It comes from trusting your own perspective enough to express it calmly. And once someone begins living with that mindset, dismissive moments stop having the same power over them. They no longer feel like proof of inadequacy. They simply become moments of interaction. Moments where communication didn't land perfectly. Moments that pass without defining who you are. And when you reach that point, something interesting happens. You stop measuring your voice by how quickly people react. You stop evaluating your worth by how much approval your ideas receive. Instead, you focus on something deeper: clarity, integrity, thoughtfulness. And those qualities create a presence that people eventually recognize. Not because you force them to listen, but because calm authority naturally stands out in a room full of reactions. And this is where many people rediscover something they had almost forgotten: their dignity. Because dignity doesn't come from winning every conversation, it doesn't come from always being right. It comes from knowing that your thoughts deserve to exist without apology. It comes from trusting your own perspective enough to express it calmly. And once someone begins living with that mindset, dismissive moments stop having the same power over them. They no longer feel like proof of inadequacy. They simply become moments of interaction. Moments where communication didn't land perfectly. Moments that pass without defining who you are. And when you reach that point, something interesting happens. You stop measuring your voice by how quickly people react. You stop evaluating your worth by how much approval your ideas receive. Instead, you focus on something deeper: clarity, integrity, thoughtfulness. And those qualities create a presence that people eventually recognize. Not because you force them to listen, but because calm authority naturally stands out in a room full of reactions. So the next time someone dismisses what you said, pause for a moment before assuming the worst. Remember that conversations are imperfect. Remember that people often react without fully processing what they hear. And most importantly, remember that your voice does not lose its value simply because someone failed to recognize it in that moment. Your voice becomes stronger when you continue trusting it, when you continue speaking thoughtfully, when you continue showing up in conversations with calm presence instead of shrinking away. Because quiet authority is built through consistency, through the decision to remain steady, through the willingness to speak when something meaningful needs to be said. And over time, that steadiness becomes part of who you are. You become someone who cannot be easily silenced by dismissive reactions. Someone who remains thoughtful even when others rush to react. Someone whose calm presence carries weight in conversations. Not because you demanded attention, but because your composure naturally commands it. And that kind of presence changes more than just conversations. It changes how you see yourself. You begin trusting your thoughts more. You begin expressing ideas more freely. You begin recognizing that your perspective is part of the conversation, not something that needs permission to exist. That realization restores something many people slowly lose over time: your sense of personal authority, the quiet understanding that your voice matters. Not because everyone will always agree with it, but because it reflects your thinking, your experience, and your understanding of the world. And once you reconnect with that understanding, dismissive moments lose their power. They no longer shrink your confidence. They simply become part of the flow of human interaction, moments that come and go without defining your identity. And if this message resonated with you, subscribe for more reflections on emotional strength, inner steadiness, and quiet confidence in everyday life.